Hello everyone, my name is SPatel and my special populations presentation is about adolescents who are involved with the justice system who also experience substance abuse issues or have been diagnosed with a substance use disorder. And when I mean someone who's just as impacted or involved in the justice system, I really mean someone who's been incarcerated in a correctional facility, on probation or parole, or have previously been arrested. This is an important topic because many adolescents in this country experience a variety of negative experiences. However, due to a lack of support, they fall through the cracks, and this is usually due to lack of support from their family, friends, or community. And it's kind of the main reason for their substance abuse issues, but also their incarceration in the first place. So, based on this, I will start my overview of the population with just talking about adolescents involved in the justice system. So, according to Giovanni 2020, 1 million adolescents who are under the age of 18 are arrested every year. Furthermore, it was also found by Christian 2021 that 48,000 youth are currently incarcerated in a correctional facility today. And despite these jarring numbers, this is a population that's incredibly underserved, really due to lack of relevant or up-to-date information, as well as stigma. So next we're going to look at the substance abuse aspect of this overview. So according to Wetley et al. 2018, 90% of incarcerated youth have engaged in some sort of illicit drug use, specifically with cocaine and heroin. Furthermore, the Bureau of Statistics, which completed a report on the drug use of adolescents in juvenile facilities, found that over 50% of justice-involved youth met the DSM-5 criteria for a substance use disorder. This is a major issue because substance abuse issues with this population is associated with high recidivism rates, the contraction of STDs, and early violent death. In addition, the Department of Justice also reported that based on the results of a survey, more adolescent justice-impacted women engaged in a substance abuse compared to men, and the same was reported about heterosexual youth compared to youth from any other sexual orientation. In addition, in terms of the topic of culture, it is found that typically these youth come from marginalized communities or cultures that have faced intercommunity violence, lack of economic opportunity, and over-policing of their neighborhoods. This primarily affects racial minorities such as African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and indigenous communities. For example, it's reported that 63% of Native American and Alaska Native justice-impacted youth met the criteria for a substance use disorder. Now we're going to look at the best practices for screening and the assessments of youth in this population. So according to the Tips 31, screening and assessing adolescents for a substance use disorder, it was found that during the screenings, and assessments, it should typically be done during the first 24 hours when a youth enters a correctional facility. It was also explained that it should occur consistently throughout a youth's stay or involvement with the justice system. So, for example, if a youth enters a facility, the screening and assessment should be conducted when they first enter, throughout their stay, and right before they leave. And really, the whole purpose of this is to identify behavioral changes for the clinician so they can help create a treatment plan that kind of caters to the client's needs and just what they need to work on. Furthermore, screenings and assessments should also be multimodal comprehensive. This means that the clinician should use multiple different types of methods in order to gain a full picture of an individual's physical, emotional, and environmental situation or circumstances. From this, a diagnosis should be based on the results of the screening assessments help determine if the client meets the DSM-5 criteria, and of course, the diagnosis should be based off the results from screening assessment tools that are easily applied to or useful towards adolescents impacted by the justice system. So now we're going to look at screenings and different types of screening methods. So the first one that would be beneficial for this population would be the Adverse Childhood Questionnaire. This is a 10-item questionnaire that asks questions about childhood neglect and family dysfunction. The reason why I chose this screening method is because typically many youth experience a variety of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, which are all known to be risk factors to someone developing substance issues later on in life, such as during adolescence. I would also use the briefer screener for alcohol, tobacco, and drugs screening method, which asks the client about their history and frequency of their drug use and then puts the client into one of three categories, which is no reported use, lowered risk, or higher risk. And this is basically from the article by NIDA, and it basically shows a couple questions that is used in the Adverse Childhood Questionnaire. And this questionnaire could be given to either the parent of the child or the child themselves. So the questions that's asked in this figure are the ones that are provided to the parent so when they're completing the assessment. So now we're going to look at assessments. An example of an assessment that I would use when screening someone from this population would be the adolescent drug abuse diagnosis from the TIPS 31 again. And this is a 151 item questionnaire that asks about 9 life problem areas. The reason that I chose this assessment is because it's been proven to work well in the juvenile justice settings and is easy and efficient due to asking yes or no questions for multiple sections and is able to show behavioral change before but also after treatment as well. So now we're looking at the biology, developmental factors, and etiology factors that influence this population. So in terms of developmental factors, it is first important to talk about the issue of brain development. This is because it was explained by Luna 2017 that adolescents have an underdeveloped frontal lobe, specifically the prefrontal cortex. This is significant because this area is important to functions such as impulse control and decision making. As a result, due to lack of brain development, adolescents are more likely to engage in risky behavior. Furthermore, according to Young 2017, it was also found that incarcerated adolescents have higher rates of ADHD or attention deficit disorder than the general population. This is important because it explained by McCulley and Kozak 2025 that youth who are comorbid for ADHD, such as comorbid for substance use disorder and ADHD, are more likely to engage in criminal behavior as well. For biology, it's necessary to discuss the reward pathways in the brain. This is because according to Duell et al. 2023, that delinquent youth are more reward driven, meaning they have a preference to immediate rewards. This is due to a greater neural tracking of reward outcomes in various brain regions, which makes them more vulnerable um, to drug abuse by continuing to use an illicit substance to get that immediate pleasure from the dopamine. So here's some additional etiology factors to consider. So according to Simon et al. 2022, um, other factors contribute to the SUD in adolescents involved in the justice system is accessibility to illicit substances, family history of SUDs, and other mental health disorders, especially with parents, as well as high residential mobility, which is basically the high frequency of changing or moving from different homes and neighborhoods, which is a major issue because it could result in a high amount of instability in one's life. Now we're going to look at social forces and norms and policies. So the first social force that's important to look at would be the heavy gang affiliation in adolescent populations. This is directly related to substance abuse because according to Quinn 2019, gang affiliation is associated with higher rates of substance abuse, specifically an earlier onset for alcohol and marijuana use, as well as negative police interactions, which of course relates to the whole being justice impacted. Juveniles who are involved with the justice system are more likely to be involved with gangs due to early exposure to community violence. And this kind of relates to the whole topic of norms because by being exposed to community violence, it creates this normalcy of engaging also in violent behavior in order to fix problems or to get what you want. Other social forces that influences youth could be their peers, and this is because youth will return to their peers when it comes to support, and that kind of results in them engaging in riskier, dangerous behavior such as substance abuse, not only because of peer pressure, but like I said, to gain support. And the reason for this is because a lot of the youth in this population really come from families with a lot of dysfunction, and so they typically turn to their friends and from school and their community, and that lack of pro peer social support can increase their likelihood of engaging um, in negative behaviors, which of course increase their likelihood of becoming incarcerated or engaging in recidivism after reentry. Something else that's important to note is the war on drugs and the zero tolerance policy of the 80s and 90s, which of course is discussed by Stowe et al. And it's basically involved the huge crackdowns on low income or marginalized communities where many people, including adolescents, were incarcerated for nonviolent drug charges. And during their incarceration, many institutions use very punitive or strict approaches as opposed to rehabilitation and treatment approaches, which played a huge role in recidivism as well. And while there has been a huge reform in the prison system and how we treat adolescents who are justice impacted, a lot still needs to be done. So next I'm going to talk about my beliefs and attitudes while working with this population. And overall, I would say that my honest, genuine belief is that just more needs to be done. Like I said before, this is an underserved population, and a huge part of that is due to misinformation, lack of up-to-date information, and just a lot of negative stigma as well. I personally have worked with justice impacted youth in the past during undergrad, and something that I've learned over these years is that truly the way to go is using a treatment over punishment approach. And this is because providing youth the proper resources and skills, as opposed to just locking them up and throwing away the key, is that it just gives them, like I said, the resources and skills that they need in order to succeed, which not only benefits them, but also the community in general by keeping communities safer. And yeah, so, and also ways that I plan on learning more about this population and just gaining more knowledge is definitely by reading literature from scholarly articles, such as by NIDA, as well as the Sentencing Project, which is an organization that provides information about the current state of our justice system. So definitely through that, but also through, practicum experiences and internship experiences where I really get a hands-on experience working with individuals from this population. And these are my sources. Thank you so much.